Like, it's really expensive, like $550 to buy this. So, Apple's AirPods Pro. I just got them as a gift, and apparently I want to do a video review on them. So, I guess this is that. So it's not going to pan out like everything is so perfect, it's so easy to use because it's just all like so automatic. I mean, that is part of the experience, sure, so it is something I will kind of skim over. However, I'll also be looking at a couple of potential issues. Things that I think are more likely to be overlooked. So let's dive in. So when you first try them out, it automatically turns on noise cancelling, giving you a stellar introduction to it directly off the bat. Only the AirPods Pro has this, but it works very well to bring noise from any machinery you might have running, like fans, filters, dehumidifiers, etc., to almost total silence, similar to being in a very quiet and small room. It isolates audio and allows you to clearly discern more aspects of it, making any professional audio recording where there's not much ambience sound like just that. Once you get it connected, there's an option to turn off audio ear detection if you don't want it to pause and invert the output device setting when you insert them. Although it does offer peace of mind to have noise cancelling activate automatically to save battery. The stem of the headphone can also be pressed, allowing you to pause or be held down until a sound plays, toggling between noise cancelling or transparent mode, or is actually listening via the microphone and playing the surroundings back through it, which I guess could be useful. I've also tried the JLab Epic Executive earbuds, so I'll briefly skim that as well. They were quite a bit louder than these AirPods. It does have its own volume controls, and if you're not charging them while using, they do control a volume multiplier specific to the product. If you are charging them, however, they just disconnect the earphone, so you have to reconnect it. And you only have the system volume that can be adjusted with the keyboard controls. And what's more, if you try and go down to 1, it just sort of makes this low beeping sound and conks out, so it has to be higher, and doesn't even change between 2 to 1 with incremental volume controls, which is Option Shift Volume. In some cases you can use on-screen sliders, but they are kind of annoying to use. As someone that doesn't like loud concerts, theaters, or any of the like, that is totally nonsensical design. And they also broke. The charge port just sort of came loose inside the casing, which along with the above might be that the intended customer is just someone that wants to use them as travel headphones. While the AirPods don't have their own volume, they also aren't as loud, even with the active noise cancelling. So usually it's fine at like 3 to 5, even with the on-screen mult set at maximum. So as it turns out, that's not an issue at all. It is kind of satisfying how they're magnetic, the case is magnetic, but that's about it. So now that we're through with this part, let's get to a couple of issues. First off, there's an area where the AirPods Pro actually might fall short. According to Apple's list of features, they list adaptive EQ on the AirPods Pro and only the AirPods Pro. So naturally, I thought, what is adaptive EQ? Well, if you Google it, like just put AirPods adaptive EQ, the first result that you can see here is actually a critique on discussions.apple.com. And it seems like they were hearing like distortions because of other ambient sounds, because it's updating like 200 times per second, which is a lower rate than many frequencies in the audio spectrum. And because it's supposed to always work subliminally, it's something you cannot turn off. You're hearing me. You pay $250 for that, and yet Apple could not be bothered to even add a simple toggle so that you can tell it to not use this very new technology. Much less settings for if you want to use it, but you want to change how often it updates, or to limit certain frequencies, or to not update unless you put them in or you reinsert them, or the intensity of the adaptations, or nothing like that. While it's not something that I've found any issue with, it does sound annoying and kind of dumb, quite frankly. The biggest thing I was wondering about is where the AirPods would land in the area of audio latency. If you just want to play music, this is completely a non-issue. If you want to watch a video, that's still linear media, so it's still not impacted, as the computer can deliberately offset the video from the audio of that video to get them back in sync. So if someone is talking, their voice will still be in sync with the motion. For any sort of video game with sound effects, or more importantly if you want to use an audio application like GarageBand or Logic, that's where things get problematic. Audio latency, as you may have guessed, is delay between the computer trying to produce sound effects and when they actually reach the speakers or headphones that you are using. If you use a Bluetooth audio device, the duration of this can be really disorienting in many cases. Now, I'd use the Magic Keyboard and Magic Mouse via Bluetooth, and I have never noticed any problems. So when I first got it, I thought Apple might be using a lower latency Bluetooth connection. It seems like standard Bluetooth is 200 milliseconds delayed, which also translates to 1/5 of a second, which is about how much the mini Jambox and JLab devices were lagging, and that was noticeable to me. So I think if the keyboard or mouse were actually that delayed, I would have noticed that. Like if I was writing something and each letter was that delayed to show up, so it's obviously faster than that. But now, let's actually see the effect that latency can have, and where the AirPods stand in this scene by using Logic as a test. So if you open Logic Preferences, which you can either via the menu bar and select Logic Preferences, or just hit Command, then if you go to the Audio tab under Devices, this is where you set the output audio device which you want Logic to use. Like it's something you can set for the whole computer, but Logic has its own setting as well. Or you can just select System Setting. It's also where you can look at this number which says Resulting Latency. Now if this thing reads anything along the lines of like 200 or so or more, then you're going to have issues. One other thing that can affect it is this I/O buffer size setting, which you would change depending on how complex the project is, otherwise you might get this warning that stops playback, but it can only affect it by like 30 milliseconds, which that's like a very minor addition to the latency that you get with Bluetooth. So anyways, 200 milliseconds is the latency that I noticed with the mini Jambox and the JLab. So let's try and set this to the AirPods, and let's see what this number is going to say about it. Yep, still exactly the same, 192 milliseconds. I guess maybe keyboard and mouse input data is just easier to send at lower latency or something. So that might or might not sound bad. After all, it's just a fraction of a second. But what does that actually do? How does it impact things? Well, to demonstrate, I'll just offset the audio from the video in post to show you what it looks like, because I can't really record latency through the audio device. So I'll just be using the multi-output with the mini Jambox. So here's 200 milliseconds, like these Bluetooth devices. So what you listen for is when the key is pressed, and then after some delay, when you actually hear the output. And now comparing that to the built-in output, the speakers built in the computer, in this case Mac Mini 2014, so it sounds like tin cans for speakers. Although selecting this device, the latency reading drops from 200 milliseconds to 18.1 milliseconds, less than 1/10 of what it was, and less than 1/50th of a whole second. And sure enough, it's really responsive. It's almost startling how responsive it is compared to using Bluetooth. Now just one single note, obviously that's not an issue. But of course this applies if you want to try and play something on it. It can render your performance and your timing quite sloppy compared to what it actually is. You have to try and compensate for this, or focus more on your input, what you're pressing, instead of actually being able to focus on the audio. It's very distracting and it can cause you to accidentally skip or insert notes, or you can sort of lose orientation. And it can be very annoying and very confusing. And the AirPods is even worse, because if you use noise cancelling, you can't even hear it very well because it's isolating the output, making it even easier to just focus on that. So it's even more confusing. Like it would be perfect to just be able to use that noise cancelling, but it just makes things more difficult because of latency. And again, you cannot use them through any wired connection, at least not without some aftermarket add-on. You have to use them totally wirelessly. So if you want to use some sort of other device that has a headphone jack, and you can't use wireless headphones with it, now you have no option to use these with that. The JLab, you can at least use that headphone adapter to connect to a headphone port, and they work as wired headphones. There's very low latency, and you can actually hear them at 1/16 of full volume, or even less, like down to 1/4 of that using Alt-Shift volume. Although you can't use noise cancelling unless they're charged because it doesn't power it. And you'd think if there's really just no way of connecting at low latency through Bluetooth, then you should have the option to use them through a cable if they can do all of that other automatic nonsense. I mean, Apple did have quite the influence in this true wireless trend. So while I don't know of any other brand that does that either, I do imagine the engineers behind these AirPods knowing this could be a problem. And they could have easily just provided an optional accessory for that. I mean, I feel like Apple is sort of known for stuff like this. Like insisting that you use their high technology or do something their way and just limit other options. It really reminds me of when they just scrapped the headphone jacks. Now they insist, like if you have perfectly usable wired headphones, no, you use wireless headphones. It's also with their rechargeable Magic Mouse too. Like you can't use it while charging, much less actually working as a wired mouse. Although that's absolutely not much of a problem at all. You have to enable right click, you cannot middle click at all, etc. It is kind of one of my gripes with them is these kinds of design issues, and how they focus on simplifying things. So anyways, to wrap this up, I kind of don't really recommend these. Like if you want to have wireless earphones, there are a lot of competitors nowadays. especially if you want noise cancelling or a variety of interchangeable ear tips. You can only get those from the AirPods Pro. But if you get that, you might possibly experience some annoyance from the adaptive EQ, and again, not being able to turn it off. I would say you might want to look into other competitors if you really want to get noise cancelling wireless earbuds. And if latency is going to be an issue for your case, like even for gaming, or even iOS has GarageBand now as well. So if you think that might be annoying, then you should look into some earbuds where you can actually use them wired as well. Something like the JLab, which also has some other ear tips with it. Although again, that product had some issues, so I would say that you might want to do some research on that. Also, I don't know of any that can work as wired, but that are also in the compact split wireless style like these are, like not tied together somehow. So if you want that, Bluetooth and latency might just be like inherently something you'll be dealing with. Or you could just get full over-ear headphones. Or get both. Although, as I am in fact aware, Apple does have this very new AirPods Max product coming out. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. Well, I mean, I kind of do know how I feel about that. Like, it's really expensive, like $550 to buy this. You can almost buy a computer with that kind of money. Apparently it can also connect directly as well, but apparently you're required to buy an extra lightning to headphone cable that, from Apple, will run you $35 extra. On top after you spend $550 on their headphones. Making it seem kind of obvious whether or not that's worth balling out for that. Anyways, let's move on. Aside from all of that, it certainly was interesting seeing how these are, so I guess I'll leave it there. So I hope you found this helpful, or just something interesting to watch. And if so, you can tell the algorithm. As always, thanks for watching.